the nurse started questioning me like, have you thought about taking your own life? And then I was like, now that you mention it, yeah, kinda. And that's when she was like, okay, we're gonna have to take you to another room. And as we were walking to the other room, my friends were just like looking at me with like ghost pale faces.
Welcome to the Psychology of Achievement. In this episode, you're going to hear an inspiring and real story of mental health transformation, from hospitalized psychosis to building a thriving personal and professional life. And this story challenges the belief that our labels and our diagnoses define us, while also exploring the exact mindset shifts that you can make regardless of your situation to unlock healing, growth, and unlikely levels of success in your own life. Enjoy, and let's dive in. Pramod, back in 2019, you ended up at rock bottom. You had just been admitted to the hospital for a mental health crisis. You'd put on 3 different medications just to manage the psychosis, and you were told that you'd have to be on these medications for your entire life. But then just a few months later, you were totally back to normal. You landed a dream job, and you were a professional dancer for the Detroit Pistons. With so many people struggling with mental health issues, I think that stories like yours are so important to understand that things can change for the worse and for the better. And I want to understand what happened and how things turned around it. And so, can you take me back to 2019, where things started? Where were you in life at that time? What was going on for you?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that intro, Jordan. So where I was, 2019, I was a junior in college. It was second semester, so the winter semester, around February. School ends in May, and junior year internship matters a lot, right? Going into that summer after junior year, I didn't have an internship lined up, so that caused point one stress, 1 point of stress.
Sure.
The second point of stress was my friends were not in a good situation emotionally. One person was going through a breakup. Another person was just sleeping at 6 a.m. Another friend was just like living with us because they didn't like their roommate situation. And I was kind of like the emotional support for all these people. Number 3, I was the leader and founder of a national dance team where we
Wow.
competed across the nation in Bollywood fusion. So, you've seen in Indian movies how they dance in Bollywood, mixed with a bunch of hip hop and other stuff, other songs. And so we were nationally ranked, and I was the team captain, team leader for that. And so, with all these 3 things in mind, it weighed so much pressure on me because there was too much on my plate than I could handle. I bit way more than I could chew, right? Plus classes, plus preparing for exams, right? Plus nightlife, plus
Yeah.
forgetting the basics of health. And so that's truly where I was, right? And
Yeah.
the outside pressures and internal health started creating a tornado inside me. And
Yeah, totally.
that's where I was.
Yeah, got it. So, what program were you taking? Or like, what were you studying?
Yeah. So thanks for asking that, because I got into the number 1 program in the country for supply chain management at Michigan State University, right? And so I should be like on cloud 9, right? Like I was nationally ranked on a dance team. I got into the number 1 desired degree at my university, but like my heart had like a tight devil's grip on it, and I didn't know why.
Yeah. And this is such an important thing, I think, because as you said, on the outside, it looks like everything is just like chef's kiss. You're in like the best school, amazing program, future ahead of you, a national ranked team, you're doing all of these things. And yet, when we start to dig below the surface, it's like everything's not so hunky dory anymore, right? And so you said you had like this grip on your heart. What did that feel like at that time as all of that pressure was mounting? Like, yeah, internally, what was going on?
Yeah. So internally, um, I was providing a lot of support for others,
Yeah.
and I knew how to just like fly by, just like get through things, wing things, not necessarily do my best. And on the inside, I thought everything was okay, right? Sometimes we're blindsided because there's just so much going on. You never really have time for yourself. So to be honest, I thought I was okay. And as things progressed, I started to not be able to sleep. I started to start worrying. I remember I was on a phone call with my mom, and she could tell that my confidence was declining. we had another dance competition coming up, and my mom could tell that I was starting to get worried, which never happened before because I was nationally ranked, like number five, top five in the country. Like, why is he getting worried? So that's how things started to spring up. Like, it was just like a slow descent
Yeah.
into worriness and lack of sleep. So,
Right.
which weighed in my focus. I started to notice that I wasn't able to focus anymore.
Hmm. Got it. When you talk about the sleep, was that like you're up at night because of the worry, like your mind just wouldn't shut off, or was there any something else going on? Like what was? Yes, can you explain that just a little more?
Yeah, it was more so of like my mind wouldn't shut off, right? Like, sure, I didn't have an internship. Sure, I had like a couple of responsibilities to take care of. But like, as any college student would, like, oh, I'll get to it eventually. Like, I had
Yeah.
like that kind of attitude. But when the sleep started going away and I wasn't able to like shut off my brain, that's when I was like, okay, what is going on? Like,
Yeah.
my thoughts are going 1,000 miles per second
Yeah.
about like irrational things, nonsensical things, right?
Yeah. Do
So
you remember any examples of like the types of thoughts that would go through your head at the time?
it would more so be like noise. It'd be
Like mental
noise,
noise?
mental noise,
Sure.
along with intrusive thoughts. Is this going to work out? Am I going to get a job? Why am I not happy even though everything on the outside is going well? And oftentimes we would have me and my like roommates at the time would have a lot of like philosophical debates about like what is existence, what is life, do you believe in God, do you not believe in God? And I was always born like I was always brought up as a spiritual kid and stuff, and so those thoughts would enter too, like, okay, so like what is actually going on with life, like what is it, all those stuff, and it would be a lot of like back and forth at a super fast rate. Those kind of
That
thoughts
can
would.
contribute to the worry and the doubt and the feeling of like insecurity inside of ourselves, and we don't know where we stand with such fundamental things, right? Okay, got it. So sleep starts to decline, worries playing through your mind, you're doubting yourself, you're losing that confidence, focus starts to go, you realize, okay, hang on, I'm not really happy here. And then what starts to happen?
So a dance competition in the Bollywood fusion dance circuit looks like Friday you arrive at the city. So it's all over the country, right? You arrive at the destination city. And that Friday you meet all the other teams. You have like a mini get together slash like dinner type event. You rest up Friday night. Saturday it's all day rehearsal and competition at the end. And right after competition, it's like a all night party.
Sure.
And Sunday is recovery. And so one weekend really throws you into a spin, right? One weekend itself. And we had two back-to-back weekend competitions.
Right.
So I came off of one competition and we got second place, yay, whatever. And the next 4 or 5 days, my sleep starts to decline, right? My focus, I just could not focus on anything. Leading up to another competition in Minneapolis, which we had to take a flight for at Friday, 3 a.m. And we land like that night. I lose my car keys, and I was responsible for taking four other teammates to the airport.
Oh no. Sure.
Lose my car keys. I beg my roommate, can I please use your car? I promise. We're just going to the airport. It's not like I'm leaving it in some stranded place, right?
Yeah.
Begged him for a minute, and he finally said, "Yeah, for sure. Go take the keys." Turns out his car had low pressure tire, and we stopped like halfway, try to fill the gas, but not the gas, the air pressure of the tire, but it wasn't working. Whatever. We rushed to the airport. They missed their flight, but I
The
make
teammates.
my teammates missed my flight, but I make my flight.
Okay. How did that? Sorry. How you guys were on different flights?
Yes, they
Okay.
four of them had a different flight, and I had my own flight. Mine was like a little later, so I had
I
a
see.
little room. They missed their flight. I make mine, and this was happening all at 3 a.m. Right, and to stay awake, I drink coffee,
Okay.
and I was jittery, completely jittery,
Yeah. Just caffeinated to the max.
caffeinated to the max.
Sure.
All the self-loathing started happening as soon as I realized they missed their flight. So the insecurities plus the events outside that were happening were just like really intertwining for a perfect mess. Once I landed, friends could tell was something wrong. I could tell something was wrong. I thought I would be able to calm down, but it felt like my heart was at my throat, right? And I had a coding project due.
Right.
Coding projects, you need a lot of focus and stable mind for that. And so during those 3 days at the competition, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I was like losing it, right? I would just go into the corridor where my roommates weren't, like teammates weren't in the room. I'd start journaling on my Google Docs, be like, what is going on? Why do I feel like this? This is the weirdest feeling ever. I feel like out of control. And that night, the Friday night where we meet all the other teams, that's when I knew something was severely wrong because I would start getting like mini panic attacks, right? I would be like so aware of everything that's going on, but at the same time, I'd just be like fighting for stability. I was like, I actually remember a moment I ran into the bathroom and I just like grabbed my head. I'm like, what is going on right now? Right. And I would just look in the mirror. I'd be like, is this real life? Like, what is this experience?
Right. And so, sorry, as you're going through this, so there's all of this stress that's building and building and building and building, and it sounds like it's really like coming to a head in this moment. Like you're at the competition, you're starting to see all the other teams, and you mentioned like your heart's in your throat, and it sounds like your mind was in this like chaotic spiral. I don't know if that's how you would describe it, but that's what I'm hearing from you, right? When you say like it was the weirdest feeling, you whipped open that Google Doc and you're typing down, is there any, do you remember it clearly enough to try to describe what that was like? That weird feeling, or what kind of thoughts were going through your head, or
It felt like it felt like I couldn't catch a break,
yeah.
right? I couldn't let go. Like I couldn't just like sit back and relax. It felt like I lost the ability to take a chill pill,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
It felt like that coding was just gone.
Yeah.
And actually, to give you a bit of to backtrack a little, I actually remember the moment that thread that's holding my mind and body together, it snapped, right? So just to backtrack a little,
Mm-hmm.
it actually happened the previous competition. We came back from the competition Sunday. I was supposed to rest, but because we won second place, all my roommates were there and they're like, yo, let's celebrate, take a couple drinks,
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. And finally, I take a shower, I sit on my couch, and I was like, and then my eyes were like slowly like closing, and my hands were like shaking, right? Because I just had no energy left in me, right? And I was like, all right, I'm just gonna go sleep. Got up and I started walking towards my room, and the friend that was staying with us, she was, they had a problem with their own roommate, so they were staying with us. That friend, they came up to me and gave me a hug. Hugs are supposed to feel good, but this was like a depressive hug, like a I need your emotional support hug. And I could hear her crying on my shoulder, but I wasn't able to provide her emotional support because my
Yeah.
body was like at the point of collapsing.
Yeah.
And at that moment, the string that was holding my conscious together snapped.
Mm.
I believe that was the moment on where it was spiraling. Now back to the,
Wait. I want to hear more about that. That's very interesting that you felt within yourself like something snap. So you're at that point where you have nothing left and people are still asking and even demanding from you, right? It sounds like she didn't ask for a hug. She just came and was like, I need your support.
yes.
That snap, was it like a feeling? Was it a knowing inside yourself? I know these are weird things to put into words, but was it like you knew it, you felt it? Was there, yeah, I'm trying to understand what was that moment like?
It was like a rush of all the worst hormones.
Hmm.
It was like you could feel in your mind that like when you like imagine you just went bankrupt, right?
Right.
Those were the thoughts that came in, but the feeling that came up was like this is it, right? Like
Right.
fear to the max, right? For no real reason because it was like a hormonal thing.
Yeah.
And when I went into my room, that's when the million miles of thoughts came in.
Right.
Million miles per second of thoughts came to my head.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Very interesting. I'm glad you went back and shared that. I think that's
Yeah.
a very important moment. Yeah. Okay. So now anything else there, or are we jumping back to the
Yeah.
second competition?
So back to, the second competition where I was in the corridor and stuff, like typing stuff. Like I felt alien. That's how it felt. Felt like some alien things were happening, right? Because at the same time where I was freaking out, my awareness was super big. Like I was hyper aware of every detail, right? However, my brain was dysfunctional.
In what way?
I couldn't make sense of what was going on. All I knew was that I was picking up on a lot more data than,
Right.
and for a brief period, I just like put brute force energy that Friday night and got my team to like rehearse. Right. Somehow I just scrunched up
Hold
all
it
the
together.
remaining, yeah, pulled it together, all the remaining energy, and I just like pushed through to do the remaining Friday rehearsals.
Mm-hmm.
But in the middle of practice, I remember I squeezed it all out. I didn't have anything left in the tank.
Yeah.
Panic attack. And my friends didn't know how to react, right? So like they just like kind of carried on. They tried to do their best by themselves. And that's when things got really confusing. And I was like, bro, like I'm so ready to give up and like not like do anything to keep the team going because I didn't have anything left to keep myself going.
Yeah. You can't pour from an empty cup.
Yes.
Okay, so you had a panic attack. And for anyone who's listening and has never experienced a panic attack, can you describe what that was like for you?
It felt like so many thoughts were going through my head that I couldn't slow down enough to communicate what was happening. I was at a loss for words, and this was in the middle of a dance practice, right? So I had to recall dance moves, but my cup was so empty that I couldn't. And it was such a weird feeling like I'm gasping for air, and I can't use my brain.
Right.
And my body's not responding. And my thoughts were so loud that I couldn't hear anybody else speak.
Wow.
Yeah. And
Talk about overwhelming.
yes, it was like overwhelming to the max.
Yeah.
Yeah, at one point, yeah, whatever. I pushed through the competition, pushed through. I mean, like at that point, I knew something was wrong with me. I didn't even care about the competition anymore. We got like last place, whatever. So we
Do you feel
really
sorry,
dropped down from the rankings.
yeah, do you feel like that's because of how you showed up and like the team kind of fell apart as a result of you falling apart, so to speak?
So it was actually like the perfect mix of things to go wrong. In my opinion, we should not have gone to that competition, but other teammates pushed to go to that competition, right? I knew that our team wasn't necessarily ready for that competition, but somehow we ended up signing up and going.
Sure.
And I didn't really have any high hopes because it was like one of the most difficult competitions. They're like other teams were like really, really good.
Okay. Sure.
So I didn't have high hopes. Plus, like 2/3 of our team was missing, so we were already at a disadvantage.
Right.
So given those circumstances, plus I was already losing my mind. Plus, people's energy was dropping. So it was like in a total mix.
Okay. That makes sense. Sorry. Please continue. I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
Yep. And so on the way back, right, I was like, "What? I don't even care about this competition anymore." On the way back
Sure.
on the flight, I got to the airport and I sat down. Like, let me just sit down, right, to see if I can catch a break, right. As I sat down, I was like wobbling. My eyes started getting heavy. My feet and fingers started getting heavy. When I pulled out my phone to get my boarding pass, I think I hallucinated. I saw like pop up saying like Jesus will save you, like you are okay, you are good. This like I couldn't even explain like what kind of pop-ups would come, right? And I was like, okay, this and I just kept trying until I got my boarding pass, right? And that added to the anxiety. I'm like, why is my boarding pass not coming up? So finally, somehow I got it. And when I was standing in like security line checks, I could feel like blood rush to my feet and my fingertips and my head just like nodding. I thought it was also my eating was not right. I didn't have enough food, especially like after dancing. Of course, my body was torn apart. And on the flight back, right, I was also hyper aware of everything.
Right. You still had that expanded like hyper awareness of everything happening. Sure.
Exactly. And I was sitting next to two people. One guy who was saying, I hate flights, I'm afraid of flights. And a girl who was crying because she was watching
No.
something or texting someone or whatever, right? And I remember that flight, we have turbulence, right? Here and there.
Yeah.
It's just like a little shaky. But on this flight, we had like turbulence that was so big that you could see people's head like go up like that from the back,
So
right?
like you were behind them and you could see like them like
Yes.
lift up above their seat. Wow.
Yes. The girl went from crying to straight sobbing.
Yeah.
The guy to the left of me who was afraid of flights just immediately started praying. And I started noticing like bad vibes, bad energy very close to my proximity.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is something is at play here. Like, this is unusually disturbing and unusually sad
Right.
and negative. Somehow I made it back. I couldn't drive, and my friends were like, "Yo, you need to stay the night at somebody's place before you drive all the way back to your apartment." And it was like a 90-minute drive, and they were like, "You're in no condition to drive."
Is that because they saw you at the airport, like once you had all landed, or how did
FaceTime.
so you landed, FaceTime them, and they were like, bro, like you got to stay there.
And so another friend picked me up. He knew something was wrong. He was like, "Yeah, let's figure this out tomorrow. Just go to sleep." Went to sleep, woke up, still was not okay. Was like, my throat was like quivering, could not speak properly. Honestly, a lot of this could have been reversed. When my parents came, they came to drop off food before I go back to university. Like, I was in Detroit and I had to drive 90 minutes to East Lansing, which is 90 minutes away. I should have just went home with them and like truly rested up.
Yeah.
But somehow I convinced them like that I was all right. Just give me the food. I gotta get going. I gotta drop off my friend's car because he's waiting. It just came up with some excuse and they
Yeah.
believed it. On the way, I didn't drive back. My roommate or my friend, close friend, drove my roommate's car back.
With the tire issue.
The tire issue.
Sure. Okay.
And he was my childhood buddy, right? So I knew I was in a safe place. And as I was talking, I just broke down into tears. I just straight cried for like solid 10 to 15 minutes, trying to explain to him what was going on.
Yeah.
Once I and he was like, he didn't know what to do. Like, he was like, okay, I'm just gonna be right, like be what he, like, be the space that he needs. Once I got back, think I tried to go to sleep. When you try to go to sleep but you don't really sleep, you just lay there in thoughts type.
Yeah.
I remember calling my parents, just like crying to my parents, and they're like, "Why did you not just come home?" type.
Yeah.
And I would have these weird moments of like having glimpses of like God, but also just like extreme anxiety, right? And what I mean by God is just like that expansive awareness of like hyper awareness of like, I know everything, like I get everything at a energy level. But at this, like, and I say my mind was dysfunctional because I couldn't make sense of it.
Sorry, your mind was dysfunctional because you could, or because you could not make sense of it?
Could not make sense.
Because you could not make sense of it. Okay, sure. Yeah.
And my friends were like, yeah, they were just trying to be supportive and stuff, but at one point they just got way too worried. They're like, okay, we got to take you to the hospital.
Right.
So when I was there, I was still like mildly conversational, right? And again, I was still like super shaky, couldn't really sleep, but also slept. Once we got there, the nurse started questioning me like, yo, what year are you in? What year are you in? How from? What's your grade or whatever? All the basic questions. And then she was like, "Have you thought about taking your own life?" And then I was like, "Now that you mention it, yeah, kinda." My friends were like looking through the door where I was being questioned, and they were like, "What the hell, bro? What is he saying?" Right? Because I didn't like open up about this to them, and this was the first time it was presented to me, right? And I'm just like, "Yeah, kinda." And that's when she was like, "Okay, we're gonna have to take you to another room." And as we were walking to the other room, my friends were just like looking at me with like ghost pale faces.
Right.
Guys, I got it, right? Most false confidence. And mine was still going 1,000 miles per second. Thoughts were going wild. And then from there, that's when they take me to a psychiatric institute. That's where they prescribed me 3 medications. They like diagnosed me with like anger issues, bipolar, and like something else. I don't even know. And honestly, when I got there, I noticed that I wasn't even that, because people there have been like addicted to something for 10 plus years. They've had like other issues, like severe issues that they've been dealing with for like, more than 5 years, while I just showed up because of something that happened in like a week or so.
Right. Hey, real quick, I need your help to make this show grow. So if you're enjoying this episode, please hit the like button. If you have thoughts, feedback, or questions, please leave it in the comments. And lastly, if you want more of this, hit the subscribe button. All three options are entirely free. They help the algorithm push it to more people, which helps the show grow so that I can make more of this for you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your support. And now back to the show. Okay, so you're at the hospital because your friends took you. They're like, all right, you got to get in here. Nurse is asking the question. She asks basically, have you ever had suicidal thoughts? You said, well, yeah, now that you mentioned that, I have. Did those thoughts happen in that week leading up to that, where it was all very, very overwhelming, and in those like sleepless nights, or had you had that prior to all of that starting?
I think it was the day after the competition.
Got it.
Yeah, because I thought after the competition things would like die down. Because oh yeah, the most stressful thing is over. But like it wouldn't stop. The number of thoughts would not stop. The speed and the volume wouldn't stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's very common for suicidal thoughts is like, this seems to be the only option for me to escape the hell that I'm living. Is that where yours were coming from, or was there a different perspective behind it?
No, that's exactly it.
That's it? Yeah. Okay. Got it. So nurse is like, all right, we're getting you out of here. You give your friends that the fake confidence. It's all right, guys. I got this. And then they take you to a psychiatric unit. And you're in there and you're looking around and you're like, I don't belong here. You're not fitting in with the general types of people you see. Was that scary for you? Was that
Ex-
concerning? Like, what was that like?
Extremely, extremely. Like I was like, yep, rock bottom. This is what every, Indian kid, every Indian parent fears the most. And so, but I still couldn't make any logical sense of anything. So I just followed direction.
Right.
Yeah. And somewhere along that way, I realized that time is really important. Following a schedule is really important. Right. And I was getting divine thoughts of like awareness, be aware, like you are not your body or your mind. Like like small tidbits of spiritual knowledge started creeping in, but I still couldn't make sense of it. And at one point, I think you'll really like this. The entire hospital was like super tweaky. Everybody there was just like super restless, and it felt like everybody was having a panic attack at once.
Right. Oh
The
no.
nurses was like the nurses did their best, but they also got like tired. Like I remember one dude was just like kind of like banging his head on the wall like lightly. And I was like, you know what? Let me go to the side room and do this breath work called Bastrika, or it's called the bellows breath. Again, right? It just somehow crept in from my long-term memory, and I immediately felt better. Thoughts slowed down, my nervous system caught a break. And then at this point, I already like made some friends
In the hospital?
in the hospital because they were all like 1 to 2 years younger than me. They also a couple of them went to like, like the same university that I went to,
Okay.
but also a couple of them were like way older. And so I was like, yo, everybody get in a circle right now, right? I'm gonna teach you something to calm you down. Like, right, everyone get here right now, no exceptions, right?
Yeah.
So we sat in a circle and I taught them like the breath work. It has like hand movements involved. Within a matter of like 5 to 7 minutes, pin drop silence. Pin drop silence. And then one of the other nurses came and she gave us like a very, very, very much needed pep talk about life. She's like, if this is your rock bottom, remember the only direction from here. And so I'm like, yeah, wow, like, okay, yeah, that's a good way to put it. And shortly after, I think there was like a radio station or somebody who started playing music and she started dancing, like the nurse started dancing, and she was like such a lovely, sweet lady, like probably in her 70s, 80s.
Wow.
She started dancing and all my dance moves started coming out. And she's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, you can dance." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm the king, right?" And then she got like, like really like competitive and dancing with me, and then others started joining, and then she played like that one clap your hands, two hops this time, like that song, Cha Cha Slide or whatever. It went so everybody started dancing, and I'm like, dude, what is going on? And then a couple of days later, my friends visited, family friends visited. They knew something was like seriously wrong, right? I remember one friend visited and he's like, yo, this place is giving me the most spookiest vibes because the whole place smelled like medicine.
As in, like, it smelled like a sterile hospital, or it smelled like medicine itself? Like
medicine
the
itself.
Sure, okay.
And my friends could see I was still not okay. But my parents, when they visited like the third or fourth time, they slowly saw that I was getting better. When I got released, that's when me and my parents had like a really tough conversation, like everything about drugs, partying at college, the whole college lifestyle, right? Because my parents are very traditional and stuff.
You mentioned as you were going, so you get into the psychiatric ward and you start having these divine thoughts, this spiritual knowledge coming into your mind, but you don't really know what to do about it. You mentioned time. You mentioned that schedule was very important. And so I'm curious about these insights. And generally, a lot of times people get confused at what is thought and what is maybe like a divine knowing,
Mm,
you know? And it sounds like in this space of hyper awareness that you had gotten into, and maybe from like a hyper stressed state, it seemed to expand. Now, I'm totally reading between the lines. Please correct me if I'm wrong here, but it sounds like your awareness, your consciousness started to expand in this state, but to such a point that it was very overwhelming and there's just like too much data to even work with. But at the same time, you were having these glimpses of the spiritual knowing coming in, along with the train of the thoughts coming at a million miles a second. Yeah, I just wanted to touch back into that point and hear a little bit more about that. Am I understanding correctly? Anything else you'd add to that? What was that like, etc.?
yeah, yeah. So when anybody's thrown a bunch of pieces of data, right? I'd say a calm mind is needed to sort through all of
Mm,
that data. I simply didn't have that stability to sort through that data, and that's what we're like that's what we call mental health issue, right? And so with my awareness being so expanded, I saw I was able to see the worst of the worst, but also the best of the best from my entire childhood,
right.
right? And that's when I really started like I also had like, a phone, like the phone was on the wall, was able to call my friends and really just get some insight, right? And a lot of them were saying, "Listen, I just want you to come back and be happy, smiling, dancing. When can we get that version of you back?" Because at this point, I couldn't even recognize myself. And when they were yes, internally, and before they admitted me to the hospital, like nobody else could recognize me either. Like my friends couldn't recognize me. One of my friends was like, "Oh, I lost my Pramod." And so they were saying like, "Come back, whatever, the real me to come back." And so that's what it kind of felt like. I wasn't able to, if you were to throw the rainbow colors, if I were to throw the rainbow colors at you, all seven, it would have been too much for me to sort through. That's how it felt like.
Yeah, that makes sense. Again, I'm hearing just like this total overwhelm state. Like it's just all too much there.
Yes. It's like constantly in fight or flight mode.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people can unfortunately relate to that situation. Maybe not quite to that extreme, but a lot of people are stuck in that constant fight or flight, that overwhelm, that stress, that like on the verge of like, I just can't handle this anymore. I'm curious, like when you were in this, and so you mentioned you had the phone on the wall, you're calling your friends, you're chatting with them, trying to get some insight here. Was there any fear of judgment, criticism, shame, of like identity being like tarnished in the eyes of others? Or were you like, was that even not a consideration? Like, what was that like for you?
I'm actually so glad you brought this up because I was able to be unfiltered with the bestest of my friends.
Yeah.
Because, like, no matter what I do, I won't be judged with my childhood friends. And I'm happy to say I went to college with my childhood friends. So I knew I was in a safe space when I was talking to them. But what I
Nice.
wasn't secure about was my dance team members,
Right.
were the rest of the college community that I knew. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
what are they going to think?
Yeah.
Like, what are they going to know? Like, what if word gets out that I went to this place?
Yeah.
How are they going to think of me then?
Yeah.
What about other students at other universities?
Yeah.
Right? So that was definitely in doubt. And I kind of made the decision when I was in the hospital, like, I'm quitting the team because, like, health is priority. Like, there's no way I can do this
Right.
with security.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay. So close friends you were blessed to have safety with and to be able to just show up and be like, okay, yeah, here's what's going on and not to fear the judgment. But then everyone else, the dance team, which was, I imagine, like anytime you are working on a team, especially in the leadership role, like can be very scary, hurtful, lot of pressure. And then you also have, what about the entire university community, the other universities, the other dance teams, et cetera, et cetera. And as you mentioned, growing up, you kind of alluded to this, but your parents were more on the traditional side. And you said that you being in the psychiatric unit is basically like worst case scenario for any Indian family, right? What was there any fear about parents' judgment or extended aunts, uncles, cousins, etc.?
Yeah, of course, of course. Like I didn't want anybody else to know, right? Like
Yeah.
it's fine that my parents knew, but like didn't want anyone else to know of the situation
Yeah.
at the time.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I want to come back to your parents in just a moment. One last thing I want to check before we get there is you breathing, bellow breathing, you said it was called?
Yes, that's like the
The English translation?
yeah bellows breath. Yeah,
Bellows breath. Thank you. So you're there, it comes out of your subconscious from growing up. You're just like, all right, I'm going to go do this. You feel calm within just a couple of minutes of doing this. And then you're like, all right, everybody get over here. And first of all, they listened. I think that's really interesting considering that, the state of the people in there, based on what you've described, and then that they all participated and found the quiet within not too long. Where did the inspiration to pull everyone else in to this space come from?
at that time I was kind of like we all talked, right? All of us kind of had some kind of rapport, right? And I've always been like an extrovert, easy to talk to people, love making friends, love people type person, right? So even in
Sure.
there, I was just like boom, boom, talking to people like, why are you here? I'm in here because blah, yada yada yada. And when I saw like a couple of them just like super anxious, and a part of it was I was also anxious, but then I stepped away and came back, and they're like, "You
What's
look good."
happened?
Yeah,
Got it. Cool. And the nurse must have been like, what the hell just happened? What did you do? Right. But then I guess you communicated in some way that this was all just breath work, right?
I actually didn't.
Okay.
Because they kind of gave up. Like the nurses also just had to take their own break, so they didn't see necessarily all of this happen. They were taking their break. We calmed down, and then they came back, and they were like, "Oh,
Right.
yeah,
Cool. Okay. That's awesome. So coming back to your parents. Your parents had visited. You said 3 or 4 times, and then you were released from the hospital. Now, is that just the hospital said, okay, we've been checking on you for a little while here, and we think that you're good to go. Just take your meds.
take your meds and go to therapy."
Yeah, got it. Now, the things, so I'm from Canada, and in Canada, that doesn't cost anything to go to the hospital. My understanding is that in the States, that is not a cheap thing to happen, right? Was that a concern for you or your parents, or do you have health insurance and like it all was covered, or what was that
Yeah,
part like?
so I knew it was gonna be an expense, but I that wasn't in my mind at all till like 2, 3 weeks after coming home. And so from there, at the time, I think my dad was like looking for a job, but
Yeah,
I think he got like severance, so he was also in a very bad condition. 2, 3 weeks in, when I was home, we finally get the bills, and then it was like okay, and I think insurance, yes, of course, insurance helped out. But again, like ambulance fees, I know that's not necessarily covered fully. And if being at a place where they house you and feed you, I know costs just like rack up. Yeah.
that
So
makes sense.
during the time, no, that was not on my mind.
Yeah.
2, 3 weeks later, as I was recuperating, yeah, it all started to click and make sense.
Yeah. Okay. And coming back to your parents, because I realized you were about to get into something that seemed to be very important. I totally took
No
us
worries,
away.
no worries.
So you got out, and your parents had a chat with you. What was that like? What transpired there?
They finally got to know like the college scene, if that makes sense,
Hmm.
right?
Like
Just
what
partying.
drugs you were taking, what parties were happening, and all
Yeah.
that.
Yep. Staying up late night, just like like all like relationship stuff that I was going through, like girl stuff that was happening at the same time. How I still didn't have an internship, like just like like a lot of the things that were not freely spoken about were
Yeah.
spoken.
Yeah. Was that cathartic for you? Was there a release of emotional tension to be able to talk about that?
But yeah, oh yeah. At
Yeah.
that point, I didn't like I didn't care at all.
Right.
I was like, finally, I can just like let loose, and my health is an excuse to let it
Right.
all out.
Yeah.
And I also go even deeper. I go like, how was I as a kid? right? Do we have a history of family members having mental issues? My dad mentioned like, yeah, there's like the family village has like witchcraft involved, seeing people getting possessed and stuff. And I kept asking about my childhood, right? Like how was I during my childhood? Because like I wanted to know everything that I experienced as a child because I know, trauma and stuff from back then can you
Yeah.
experience like way later into adulthood. So I just started grilling my parents about that stuff. They were confused. They didn't know why I all of a sudden started asking about this stuff, right? But they answered anyway. Randomly started crying, was randomly sad. Parents were like, "Yeah, you're definitely not the same Pramod that we knew before." Like they kept saying, like, "Can you please just like start laughing and dancing like you usually would, like
Right.
like I am now, like the energy you're receiving now."
Yeah.
And then I'm like, "Yeah, I hear you, but I can't."
Right. As in that part of you had just been like shut off or wasn't
Yes,
available or
wasn't available exactly. And I was just very vulnerable. Like my dad was saying how I would be like a child. I would like listen to exactly what he said, right? And I would comply, like, because I was just at such a vulnerable state. Yeah, and so there's very cathartic, very releasing, verbally and through tears.
yeah. One of the reasons I ask that question is so often we hold on to things and we don't communicate about the hard conversations that need to be had. And then it builds and builds and builds. And often it is only when something snaps that then we start to have those conversations and we finally get pushed to the point of like letting go of some of those things. Right. And so, yeah, I just hear you going through that. And very interesting what you said about your parents noticing that or you and your parents noticing that you almost reverted to like this, in some ways, a childlike mentality. So, yes, there were mood swings, but then there was also this compliance that you had to your parents. As someone who studies psychology, that's very interesting. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, whether it was just like you revert back to maybe the fundamental mindset or being in the family home with your parents. Just, I imagine you went home. I don't know if you actually did, but being there with your parents, maybe that pulls that side of yourself back out, or all of the stuff that had been built up in the teens and early adulthood just got stripped away, and then what was left was the core. Yeah, I don't know. All of that's just guesses. Do you have any thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, I think it's that last point that you said. Every conceived notion of what it means to be a teen or adult was stripped away for the time being, and I was just reconfiguring my foundational being. And yes, everyone's foundational being is their inner child.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Please continue. Where do we go from here? So you're having these mood swings. Right? I hear you with the crying and the
Yep. Yep.
sure.
And so again, divine intuition came up again. At this point, I was just like, again, mood swings. You said it perfectly. I was scared shitless one point. I thought I was going to get deported because we had our citizenship ceremony and
Sure.
citizenship oath. Extremely paranoid, right? I was extremely paranoid for no reason. I would feel like everybody was looking at me. I guess, you know, I felt like I was being targeted by people. And at the ceremony, I felt like I upset some government officials and that we were going to be deported. So later that night, while I was trying to sleep, I got scared and I got visions of me being deported back to India and I had to live with my grandma and stuff. And then I just remember screaming and calling my dad, right? And I was just like burst into tears and like my parents came and stuff. They were super scared. They didn't know what happened. Funny enough, at the same time, as I was like screaming and crying and yelling, like a bunch of snot came out and like a bunch of like phlegm came out. So it was like a physiological release. As soon as that happened, an intuition came up where I was like, Dad, go get the book Power of Now from the bookshelf. Open to this page. Open up to that page. And I'm like, can you read this for me? And he immediately goes like, in any person that is healthy and in the present moment, they are extremely, extremely aware of time. And then he's like, how the hell did you know this? Where did this come from? Like, where is this coming from? And from like that moment on, I was like, time. I need to be aware of time. Yes, I might be insanely super conscious of whatever, but what needs focus right now is time. And at this time, who am I? I'm a student. What is the role of a student? To get a job, right? So I pulled out my journal that I've been meaning to journal for the longest time. At the competition, I was journaling on Google Docs, but typing
Okay.
is like also kind of neurotic because you're going at a super fast pace, right? So pen to paper, and I wrote down, what is my purpose right now in life? What do I even want as a student? Get a job, graduate college. That's it, right? So my vision and target became super, super clear, right? Cut out all other noise, quit the dance team, right? So now all my time and health was invested into classes and finding an internship for that summer.
Right.
So did the necessary work, applied again. I was still paranoid, still shaking. I felt like very, very weak. Like lost all my self-confidence. But again, I was with my childhood friends, so they supported me. Even in class, I was super, super insecure and shy and timid. Hands would be sweaty,
Right.
right? I've never had sweaty hands in my life. Hands would be sweaty, but somehow put in the work. And I ended up getting an internship for one of the biggest companies right now in the United States, which is Rivian. Yes, it's an electric car company that rivals Tesla.
Got it.
And I was able to land a logistics internship with them that summer in my cuckoo condition.
Right.
And my dad, he also figured out his job situation. He landed a government job. And I remember one night, like, I wasn't able to sleep. He came up, he was like, look what's happening. Like, he was also pretty unstable. And he was like, I'm having anxiety. You're going crazy. But we both ended up with jobs that people would like kill for. And I was like, something is at play here. What is going on? That summer was one of the hardest summers because I had an hour commute to the office location and I just really had to fight. I really had to fight the negative thoughts, fight the lack of energy, overcoming the fear of conversing with people. At one point, it took me 3 hours to send one email because there was such a resistance, right? And so my brothers, I have twin brothers, they're 5 years younger than me. They know me to my core, right? They were smelling that I was being weak as hell. They were
Like
smelling like,
mentally?
yes,
Sure.
yes. They're like, you need to push through, bro. Like, you need to
Mm.
push through. I remember we wanted to watch a Dragon Ball Z movie. Couldn't pay attention to the movie. Like I was while watching the movie, I pretend it looked like I was watching, but I was in La La Land in my head. And then my brothers would say it plain and simple. They wouldn't be soft at all. They're like, bro, you are such a pussy. And then I wouldn't take offense to this because I knew they were coming from love, right? And so I was like, yeah, you're right. Why? It's not like something happened, of course, besides the whole incident, but like there was no event that threw me into the spiral. It's just like a hormonal thing. So I was like, yeah, why am I so like scared? And my brother was like, I challenge you to start playing video games. So I played Uncharted 4, jumping
Okay.
from cliff to cliff, like super high action impact game. I'm like, okay, cool, let me play that. And I was like, wow, okay, I got over it. Like that was pretty challenging because I had to put my focus onto one task. After that game, I've started playing Last of Us.
Okay.
Have you heard of Last of Us?
I have. I've not played it, but I've heard incredible. I think I've only heard good things about it.
Yes, exactly. But it is a horror survival game, right? And I played in my basement and we had a projector and I played it with my lights turned off with the sub
Okay.
turned on.
Okay.
And I had to literally face my demons.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And coming out of that, of course, I had a lot of hesitance. I'm like, why? Why should I play this? Why should I play this? And my brother told me this one story. He was like, listen, man, he was reading a forum about this game. And this game is about, a daughter and father connection. And he said, after this one girl played this game, her dad was separated from her at around the age of 6, and he was put into prison for like, I don't know how long. But after playing that game, the game moved her so much to the point where she visited her dad for the first time after 10 years and she was 16. Broke down crying and made that connection. What? A game made her do that?
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, all right, let's figure out what this is all about. Played the game, end of the game, broke down crying.
Wow.
And from that moment on, it was like something clicked. Something clicked again, right? The same string that snapped, it felt like the same thread just like reconnected, but like thicker and stronger.
Sure.
And of course, I was taking the medication, but I was slowly weaning off. But as soon as I felt that mesh, I just stopped taking it. I just stopped taking all medication.
And this was like right when you finished the game. So let's say like the closing credits, or did it happen sometime after?
Yeah, within like that, like a week or so of finishing the game.
Got it.
And the internship was also coming to an end.
Got it.
Yeah. And the senior year of college was starting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And again, my goal was crystal clear, right? Get a good job out of college, right?
Mm-hmm.
And stop taking the medication altogether, just cold turkey, right? I couldn't even feel the effects anymore because my body was so tolerant.
Hmm.
And then my dad randomly out of nowhere one day he was like, "Did you stop taking the medication?" I was scared to say the truth because obviously everybody was forcing me to take the medication. And it's like, yeah, I stopped. And then he just gave me a big hug. He gave me a huge congratulations. I'm like, whoa, whoa, what? He's like, you've been acting normal as hell, man. And now you're telling me you haven't been taking medication?
Nice. What'd that feel like?
Huge relief. A huge. Like shoulders lightened, heart lightened. I knew I was back. The old me was back, but stronger and better.
Yeah. Got it. Okay, so there's a lot in there, and I really want to take some time to dive into that because I think there's a lot of insight to be found in what made the difference from being in a spot where I think a lot of people wouldn't recover and would actually take on the identity of I now have this thing that's wrong with me, and it came from whatever, it's genetic or it just happened, and I'm stuck with this. You mentioned that time in your bedroom, you're thinking you're going to get deported. You call your parents, your dad opens up The Power of Now at your request to a certain page, talks about the awareness of time, which Power of Now is an amazing book. I really like Tolle and his writing there. It's interesting that you chose time. Was that one of those? Yeah, where did I want this page specifically? Where did that come from?
That was the divine intuition that I was talking about. Like
Right.
it was just a gut feeling that came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Right after like such
Yeah. It's so interesting because I think people don't trust those when they come up. It's like that knowing comes up and then we doubt it. We go, no, 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 I can't do that, or that's weird, or whatever it is, right? Some justification for why we shouldn't believe it. And yet we give so much credit to all of the thoughts that otherwise pass through our mind and not the knowings. And I find it seems to be like a universal case, but I almost think of that as like the game of the mind. It's like you almost have to push through that. And anyways, it's so interesting that that happened for you. And that gave you say, okay, I need to focus on time, which then leads me to say, what am I doing at this time? What is my goal at this time? And you started to have a vision and a target. And that gave you a specific clarity to start to work toward. In that, I hear that the overwhelm of infinite potential of the things that could be happening and the focus and the awareness started to narrow down into here's the one target that I'm aiming to hit. And that helped to maybe cut out some of the noise. Is that right? Okay. How did you decide on that target? Because I think a lot of people who are really stuck in anxiety, self-doubt, keep it simple, anxiety and self-doubt, really struggle to make a decision on this is the thing that I'm going to focus on. Did you struggle with it at all at that point, or did it just was it easy for you? Like how did you do that?
it was more so of like, of course I asked the most basic question, who am I right now? I am a student. As a student, where do I go? I go to the university. What is the purpose of the university? To get a job.
Right.
What kind of job do I want?
Right. Sure.
That's it.
Yeah.
Because
Keep it simple.
keep it stupid simple.
Yeah.
Because at that point, my mind was a complex mess. And nowadays, I like to say the devil likes complexity.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Simplicity is recently reading the book Letting Go by David Hawkins. And in there, he says that I'm doing my best to get this quote right. It might be slightly off, but he says something to the effect of simplicity is the earmark of truth, as in the truth and the path of truth is actually very simple. And I just say that as like the other side of what you just said, where the devil loves complexity,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. And I think keeping it simple is so wonderful because it allows you to choose a direction.
Hmm.
And I think another analogy that I really like is like you can't turn a parked car.
Hmm.
And so if you want to change direction, you have to first move. Just start moving and then you can start to correct, right? And I hear that that's kind of what you did there. Cool. Okay. I also I want to go back to the mood swings, paranoia, shyness, especially because that was such a stark contrast from who you used to be before that, right? You had mentioned you're very extroverted. You would go out just meeting everybody, like chatting around, maybe like social butterfly. And yet here you were stuck, very, very stuck in your mind. Even if you're hanging out with your brothers, you're still just like in your mind space. And you had mentioned you were fighting it all. I'm curious, how much do you think fighting your mind contributed to you staying stuck in it?
So I use fight in a very nuanced way because I also you never fight the mind. But what I was fighting was the tendency to be negative, the tendency to be like self-apocalyptic, the tendency to sit and just like stare down and like ruminate about what could go wrong.
Yeah,
That's what I was fighting,
sure.
right?
Yep.
And by keeping myself in motion, that's how I started to build that.
Mm.
And of course, like there were days where I would just sit down and let thoughts come to me, but I knew that my mind's programming at the time was like super negative, right? And if I didn't move, I'd just fall back into the grip of negativity. And
Yeah.
so I fought to keep my body moving. I fought to keep the vision that I wanted. And that's what helped me to not be complacent in negativity.
So it was like a consistency of action toward a clearly defined goal that helped build a momentum that was positive for your life.
Yes, yes.
Hell yeah. Very cool. Very cool.
And in short word, just willpower.
Yeah, willpower. I want to expand on that willpower notion for a moment because it's such an interesting thing. We all have willpower, and there's also like an over reliance on willpower that can take place where I think it can become detrimental to some people, but it's obviously integral and very important to the positive movement as well. What exactly were you willing? Like what was it, the will to get better? Was it the will to avoid the pain? Was it the will to achieve the goal? Was it I'm very curious, like what was that?
Will to get back to normal, right? The will to get back to laugh and dance for no reason at all. The will to succeed as a college student. Will to succeed as a brown kid in the United States.
Sure.
Right. Yeah. And what was that at the moment? Get a good paying job out of college. Graduate college because I was even wondering, am I even capable of focusing enough to graduate?
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. Okay. Very cool. And were there any other things? So like at this time, you were really questioning a lot, right? Like you were questioning a lot of the fundamentals. Who am I? I'm a student, right? Were there any other things that you really started to dive into that made a difference for you during this time?
Yeah. So I'm going to continue the story a little more here.
Sure.
Senior year starts, right? I was locked in on the target, right?
Right, because you had reconnected at this point.
Exactly,
Sure.
right? Was able to dance, was able to laugh, and I actually found my dream job application, applied for it, got the first round interview because my previous internship was just so stacked because that name Rivian carried a lot of weight. Got that first round interview and I showed up 30 minutes late because I
Okay.
went to the wrong building.
Shoot.
I even doubted if they would take me forward, right?
Right.
But the lady who was the interview was super nice. She took me in. She was like, "You do realize you're 30 minutes late, right?" I'm really sorry. I just made up some BS. I had a family emergency or whatever. So okay, whatever. So we started talking, and at this point, my confidence was through the roof because I just went through like a life-altering situation. Nothing can phase me at this point, right?
Yeah.
So I just laid it out on the table like, "This is who I am. Ask me any interview question. I'm going to answer from my heart." And I answered so openly and sincerely, and I just truly connected with who she was, and she got who I was. After the remaining 30 minutes was up, it was a total 1 hour interview. The remaining 30 minutes built that connection with her. She took me to the back room to the HR person and goes like, "Move this young man to the second and third round interview right now. He is promising, he has what it takes, and he can be a consultant."
Nice.
And then she pats me on the back and sends me home. I go to my apartment. I'm just like, what is going on?
Right.
What something is at play here because a couple of months ago I was batshit crazy, and here I'm making progress towards my dream job, right? And so my friend who is a year older, he's already graduated, he's already at the job that I wanted to get into. He helps me with the interview. I do fine at the interview. A couple months later, I get the email, congratulations, you've been accepted. Immediately, I get senioritis.
Done with this. Sure.
Done with college. I accomplished the goal that I wrote back in March, and it was around like October, November this time. So immediate like victory, right? I was just celebrating so loudly.
Yeah.
And so COVID hit. I had the best COVID time because truly got time to myself, truly got to explore myself. I had a job lined up. Everything was going well. And that's when I stumbled upon this book called The Crystal and the Way of Light this month. To answer your question that you asked, was there any other like who am I life existence thing questions that I was going through? I wasn't necessarily focusing on any of that. I was just focusing on like goal, target, action, goal, target, action. That's what really got me through. And once I accomplished it, now I had like the health and the time and the space to explore ideas. And so when I stumbled upon this book, it talked about like non-duality, Dzogchen, which is non-duality, the highest teaching of Buddhism. And my dad is the one who transferred all the Eastern philosophy of Hinduism into me in a very philosophical way rather than religious way.
You mean like growing up?
Growing up, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I was like, hey, so I came across a book called Dzogchen, Non-Duality. Do we have a concept like that in Hinduism? He's like, yeah, it's called Advaita Vedanta. I've heard that word like my whole life for like, I was 22 at the time. I didn't know what it meant. But after reading that book, everything clicked. I had another string attachment, but like it was like new. It was like new, like neural networks like connecting,
Yeah.
which was almost like the size of a nuke because
Mm.
that book was talking about the fundamentals of awareness and consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it zipped me back to that 2019 incident, and it showed me that my hyper awareness that happened was in fact like a divine intervention, right? I unconsciously slipped into an expansive state, and when you're when you're not ready for it, it's gonna feel overwhelming. But what do Buddhist monks do? They spend their whole lives trying to gracefully enter the state of hyper awareness and understand the self, understand awareness, understand identity at its fundamental core. And that's when just like I just couldn't stop talking about this concept. And it talked about energy, and I was like how everything is energy, and how in 2019 I was like attracting like the worst energy, like people always crying around me and stuff, right?
Right.
And the book was talking about how monks, they also enter that state, but they start attracting mountain lions, flowers, groups of people, right? There is a part in the book where this one like super established monk guru figure would be sitting in the mountaintops, and another group of monks would go visit to learn from him. He would be sitting next to like a mountain lion, right? Because he just has that attractive energy for nature and positivity. I did too in 2019, but just for sadness and like destructiveness and just like crying, just like how that girl was crying next to me on the
Yeah.
plane.
Right.
And so that's when everything clicked. And from that moment on, I was like, shit. Like the one thing that clicked to me was like my internal world is a direct reflection of the internal world at an energetic level. And if I can manipulate my internal world, which I basically did, and that's what got me that job, then I can manipulate it further to progress in my dance career.
Right.
And this is when dancing started coming back into my life. And I
So,
started
sorry,
to,
just to go back for a second,
yeah,
because you said internal twice, and I just want to clarify. When you shift your internal world, the external world shifts? Is
yes,
that or the external? Can you repeat what you said?
exactly what you said. When I shift my internal world, the external world will shift accordingly. And I met, I experienced the bad half of that. I experienced the good half of that. Time to take it to the next level
Right.
with dancing, because of course I quit the dance team, but that doesn't mean I quit dancing. And so I doubled down, right? I practiced every single day. I envisioned going to LA. I visioned to training under like celebrity dancers, kept, working at it, working on my craft. And so we planned a friend's trip to LA. And, I was like, let me just shoot a couple DMs to see if these celebrity dancers reach out back to me. And Have you seen Not Like Us, the music video?
No.
Okay, so Kendrick Lamar, Not Like Us. There's a scene where he brings out two dancers in a shipping container area. And I DM that dancer. I'm like, hey, I'm coming from Detroit for a couple of days, wondering if you're open for a private dance lesson. Can I come meet you? Yada, yada, yada. 3 days before the flight, I get a response. Yeah, come through. Come over.
Nice.
Here's my address. Come at this time.
Wow.
I'm like, no way this just happened. Like,
Yeah.
no way. Like this, like I've been looking at this dude since I was like 14.
Right.
And
Yeah.
now
So he's like an idol for you.
yes. He's like, yeah, come over. Met him. I was just like, all the happy endorphins was just like, the hormones were just like rushing. Couldn't sleep that night. Was way too happy. Got footage of that. 3, 4 more days later, while during the trip, we were like on a walk. And of course, I messaged like a bunch of celebrity dancers to see if they would reach me out. I get another ping, and this time it's from a man named CJ Salvador, who was Justin Bieber's choreographer.
Wow.
He's like, "Yeah, come over. Here's my address."
That's crazy.
I'm just like, "What is going on?"
Yeah.
Like this is I keep like this is out of my wildest dreams, right? And he gives me his number, like treats me with such respect. It tells me his entire life story. Keep training, keep pushing, keep learning. And later into 2021, I know I keep making dance connections and stuff, and I keep practicing my craft, right? Along with my craft, I came across another book, which is called Breath by James Nestor, right? And this is when it gets like so freaky, right? So I told you I came up from a spiritual background. I've taken multiple yoga courses as an elementary kid, middle school kid, and high school kid. These courses were provided by an organization called Art of Living, where they teach you this extremely powerful breath work called Sudarshan Kriya. And when I open this book, the author starts off with saying, I walk into the course of the Art of Living program where they teach Sudarshan Kriya. I'm like, there is no way this is happening right now. Right? And
Yeah.
he's like a breath journalist and he reports on scientific studies about the breathing and what it does to you and everything. And so I read that book with utmost attention and detail because now I know the power of breath work and Sudarshan Kriya. While I'm dancing, I incorporate that practice. Of course, I wasn't consistent, but I still incorporate it, which increases my ability to shift my internal world more gracefully and with intention, right? Because I'm harnessing like such a level of peace and bliss along with dance, right? Keep networking, keep connecting, keep practicing, keep increasing my intuition. That more divine intuition moments started occurring. I ended up at the Detroit Pistons tryout. A couple weeks later, I got an email. Congrats, you've been accepted as an official Detroit Pistons dancer.
Hell yeah. What was that like for you?
Electric, electric. I was immediately telling my friends, I'm like, should I do it? Should I not do it? And at the time, my job was working out because it wasn't too busy. So I was able to fit it in my schedule. And everyone was like, bro, this is like once in a lifetime type shit. Like,
Yeah.
you better take this.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that was also a wild ride itself.
There's so much in this last little bit of your story here that I really want to dive into because I think one of the things that I have found is what you're talking about is like the most impactful thing that I think any individual can really start to do and realize for themselves. As within, so without. When we realize that we can change our internal energetic state and there's a serendipitous unfolding of reality that matches after a delay the outside world with our inside world, everything starts to change. And so you mentioned that you started to really lean into that. You really started to cultivate that within yourself. You mentioned this breathing technique taught by the Art of Living and you started to incorporate this into your dancing to cultivate peace inside of yourself. Can you talk about why peace of all of the emotions that you could choose?
It goes to that one quote. Would you rather be a warrior in the garden or a gardener at?
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, well, shit, like, of course I want to be a warrior in the garden,
Right.
right? if you think of like the greatest performers, they're the most calm in times of pressure.
Right.
And when I lost my mind, oh, that was the exact opposite.
You're the least calm.
Least calm in times of pressure.
Right.
And so dancing itself is its own like cathartic practice, right? Mind, body, and spirit all come into the present moment.
Yeah.
And along with the breathwork practice, it just like solidified that space that I get to after the cathartic release, which is absolute peace. And I've noticed that when I am at peace, the intuitive answers come up way more quickly, way more fast at like record speeds. Like if I question like, what are the odds of me dancing professional? 2 weeks later, hey, you should come to tryouts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I found for myself that I used to be very, very skeptical of that sort of thing. I think I was the type of person that I would listen to this sort of thing and say, nah, no way. Maybe for them, maybe it's just like luck or maybe whatever. There's some like rational justification for why that can't be. And so I just want to take the opportunity to say if anybody listening is in that spot, I encourage you to be skeptical and try it anyways because you have nothing, only good things I think will come out of that. And yeah, so I'm hearing from you that you used this technique, this practice to start to heal your mental health, to get like an amazing internship, to then get a dream job, to then also dance with the Detroit Pistons, really like become a professional dancer. And even before that, to connect with some of the most successful celebrity dancers in the world, to learn under them. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I don't think there's like another word that comes to mind for me except that's amazing.
Thank you, bro.
And so when did you start dancing with the Pistons? Or
It
how long did that
was
last for? Was
just 1 year, 2021 fall to 2022 winter.
cool.
And then I was like, wait, this is way too time consuming. I don't know. I don't want to be an entertainer the whole time. This is just a great experience. And then I switched into teaching at studios,
Teaching dancing.
teaching dancing at
Yeah.
studios. So that was super fulfilling. And then from there, I wanted to see if I could make dancing like a side income and something that you love and get paid for it, right? Started exploring that route. I even started posting consistently on TikTok. And again, use like this intuition internal shifting. Blew up to 33,000 followers on TikTok, right? I actually remember the day I posted my very first dance tutorial, right? How to do the butterfly afro step footwork. The next day, it's exactly what people tell you, right? Like your phone starts blowing up, uh, constant notifications, like the video views go from 100,000, 200,000, 700,000, 1 million. Follower count was going from like 5K, 8K, 9K, 10K, 20K. So she kept going at it. And this happened in 2023, right? And in 2023, I started to notice like this is great and all, but I don't see myself making a living out of this, right? And my dream job at the point was also like, okay, I kind of get the corporate world now. This is not necessarily like what I thought it would be.
So you were still consulting
Yes.
while you were doing all this? Okay. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. On the side. And so my interest and my passion and like for dance and or making dance a living was questionable, and my interest and passion for like the consulting world is was also becoming a question. And oh yeah, I should also say even at work I was able to morph the things that I wanted to happen. Like I've always wanted to work for Google, right? Like as a client. Somehow I ended up working for Google as a client. I got to work on their generative AI technology. I got to work on their supply chain system, right? And I'm like, yeah, this is not what I expected to be.
Sure.
Sure, the name and all is cool working for Google, but it's not exactly what. And same thing for dancing, right? Like, wow, it's amazing to blow up as a dancer and whatnot, but like, this is not necessarily like something I would want to get paid for as a living. And then so like, what can I do to make like a good income that I love doing? And then I was like, wait a second. I was able to overcome one of the craziest mental health situations that almost everybody is going through, just at a different level. Why don't I just teach them to overcome all the internal conflicts in the same fashion that I did so that they can harness energy and create the reality they wanted, right? My reality was in the dance world. Their reality might be in something else. Why don't I go do this?
Yeah.
So starting 2024 January, I completely shift focus and I was like, let me start putting out this message. And so that's when I started talking and researching about reality creation, internal world, diving super deep into non-duality and Dzogchen because that's what turned on the light bulb for me. From there, I started working with clients for free, right? I started working with this one girl in college who was suicidal, very similar spot as me. Told her like, yo, these are the things you have to do to transform your life. She landed her internship.
Wow.
Started working with another person who went through a 5-year relationship breakup, but he also wanted to start his own company, right? And when you're heartbroken, you can't really focus. And he was also starting to lean towards like, what is the internal world, right? Started working with him. Now he's averaging 15K per month. Then I started working with a US Army veteran, right? And I was like, shit, man, like PTSD, that's some serious stuff. I don't know if my stuff is gonna reach to that level. I was like, let's go for it, Let's go for it.
Yeah.
Started working with him. Super rough ride for him, right? Because he would have mental memories that would come up that would trigger physical responses, rib cage pain, back pain, like caught up in the throat, anger issues, isolating himself from his wife rather than opening up, right? But I stuck with him, gave him the practices, gave him like the outline, like, yo, this is exactly what you need to do. This is exactly what I did. Here's the science behind it. And now he's at a place where he's experienced real bliss, real peace for 6 months plus.
Wow. That's amazing, man.
And like all these things just started to occur. I'm like, wow, I think this is my calling, right? And even more crazy things started to happen, right? Like I started to reframe my entire perspective on what healthy living even is, right? And I came across other studies in the book Breath by James Nesters. He would say the wildest things, like allergies are not supposed to exist, right? All breathwork and meditation can cure any kind of disease, including cancer, eczema, even scoliosis, right? I'm just like, what? Okay. Then I took like some psychosomatic trainings on how the relationships you have with yourself, if it's not healthy, that could result in allergies and skin rashes. Started working with two other ladies, right? She had stomach ulcers. She was underweight. She was never allergic to dogs, but she got a dog and developed skin rashes. And then I was like, you might be experiencing some kind of psychosomatic imbalance. You to identify any grudge or tough relationship you've been having with others. And two, I really want you to cry because I started remembering the reason I had such a cathartic and fast recovery was I was crying buckets for like those 3 to 4 months during my recovery.
Yeah, really letting you know.
Yep. And told her do that and identify where if you have a grudge at all. And she was like, yeah, I have a grudge against my mom because she wasn't there when I was growing up. And yeah, I also released as much as I could. And now she's sleeping next to her dog. No
Without the
rash,
rashes. Wow.
no allergy.
Yeah.
Same thing with the second lady. I told her like you're gonna have to identify like the source of relationship and really purge it out. And then she messages me a week later, all allergies are gone.
What did that purging for somebody look like? Like what? Yeah, sir.
The uglier the cry.
Sure. Yeah, fair enough. That psychosomatic work is so interesting because I think in hindsight, like once somebody goes through it, it's like, oh, that can make a lot of sense. Like I'm just making up an example, but for example, maybe the grudge that lady had against her mom was getting under her skin, and it comes out in rashes when she finds love with a dog that she didn't have with her mom, or whatever, right? There's like it's a weird manifestation in the body of some psychological pain that we haven't processed and addressed, and a lot of really interesting books that my wife and I have started reading on this type of thing as well. Like You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay, The Mindful Body by Ellen Langer. There's some other ones because we're both like, you go to doctors for all of these sorts of physical conditions and they're like, I don't know, sorry, like we can't seem to help you. And then once you start to dive into the psychological, like maybe that's the psychological, the emotional, maybe that's where the healing needs to take place. And as you do that, you start to get into the energetic as well, right? It's like they're just so intertwined when you really take a truth seeking perspective. And so that's so cool that you are diving into that with people, that it made a huge difference for you. You're getting amazing results for clients that they were obviously very, very stuck and wouldn't have found this in a traditional sort of something if they'd taken a traditional path to solving it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one more thing that you'd be really interested in why I am so confident in the inner work is, sure, we can talk about it conceptually and intellectually, but through Art of Living, the organization, the level one is to do the breath work, right? They have another course, which is basically a silent retreat, 3.5 days, right? I know there are a bunch of places that do 7, 8, 10 days, but for whatever reason, I think 3.5 days really gave a good glimpse. Whatever the Buddhism book was talking about the state of non-duality, right? It's something to experience. It's something to be. It's something to live. A lot of these online spiritual gurus, like I guess Sadhguru being one of the most popular, he said when he felt that state of non-duality, he said every cell of his body was oozing with euphoria. And that's exactly what I felt at the end of my 3.5 day silent retreat, which basically consists of like 8 to 12 hours of meditation per day, no reading.
Yeah, just really going inward.
Yes.
For for anyone listening who's not familiar with this idea of non-duality, do you have a description or a way that you like to introduce it to people? Like what does that mean?
Yep. So to understand non-duality, you have to understand duality. And duality is the world that we interact with. Hot, cold, left, right, up, down, hard, soft, solid, liquid. You, me. I'm separate, you're separate. Your country, my country, right? And duality we need duality to interact with the world. People get so caught up in it that conflict starts arising. We're like, I'm so separate and opposite from you that I might have to beat you and be a better person than you because clearly you're not a part of me. You're separate from me, right? And then you start questioning, like, okay, even my thoughts and my emotions, like, yes, I feel them, but they're also separate from me in some way, correct? Right? Like, I am not my emotions. I am not my thoughts. I experience my thoughts. So then you ask the question, what is experiencing? What is experiencing hot and cold? What is experiencing up and down? What is experiencing thoughts and emotions? And if you peel back all those layers experientially through meditation, then you end up with the question, what is experiencing? Who is the experiencer? And of course, with practice, you go to an experiential level where you get to turn your awareness onto itself, and you come to realize that it's nothing. It's nothingness. It's the void itself. And in this void, you lose sense of up and down. You lose sense of separation. You lose sense of your identity, right? And that's what people call ego death, right? And you realize at an experiential level, like, holy crap, everything is happening within, and there is no connect, there is no separation. And that moment, I understood, like, wow, everything is truly connected.
That was a great explanation. I really appreciate that. Yeah, well said. I think that this is the type of thing, and I really like that you emphasize the experiential realization of it because it's not something that you can intellectually actually wrap your head around. In the same way, if you just read books on swimming, it's not the same as experiencing swimming. Experiencing these types of meditative states or levels of awareness or expansion of consciousness or whatever way that we want to articulate it, experiencing it is where it actually happens, right? And I hear you that you are really helping people to experience it within themselves so that they can start to unlock this new paradigm of life, this new experience of life, starting by inward and then the outside reflects it automatically, and they're really healing in so many profound ways. Is that right?
Exactly. And I think the outcome experientially, if other people want to know what that feels like, it's unconditional love. I realize that there is no separation between me and you. And I watch a lot of anime, and a lot of anime is rooted in Zen philosophy and Buddhist philosophy. And in so many ways, actually, I use like touching moments in music and anime and storytelling to really move me and use that as a way to cry and release, right? So that's
Yes.
a tip for whoever's watching to start leaning into purging your inner emotions. And I was watching this one anime, right? And
Which one?
the Jujutsu Kaisen.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, so
I really like Jujutsu Kaisen.
did you watch season two?
I forget where season 1 ends and season 2 begins. So big spoiler alert for anyone listening. We're talking about maybe spoiler stuff.
Yeah.
Where
I won't tell you exactly when it happens, but it's when the main character and the antagonist, who was finally at the end of the battle, and the antagonist he's a propagator of chaos. He just wants to see the world burn.
yeah,
And the protagonist obviously just wants to save the world, save his friends. But finally, after losing so much, right? But he finally was able to beat the bad guy, the antagonist. And he says this line. He says, meaning, I am you. When he said that, bro, I just burst into tears.
yeah,
Cause that's the line that healed me, realizing that there is no separation.
yeah. There is no separation. It's amazing the profound peace that comes when we reside in that state. There just is.
Yes. The mind does the judging, but when you stop that, it's just like it is what it is.
Mhm. I was chatting with a client the other day on that notion because some people have this interesting relationship with it is what it is, like that statement. And it can be used when not done from a place, when not said from a place of insight. It can be used to avoid feeling things,
Mm,
the fear of loss, for example. I'm not going to feel my loss because it is what it is,
yeah.
which is very different than the insight that all is, that it is all one, that it is as it is. And the the emotional state that comes or that is behind that statement is very different. And you and I are talking about the latter, whereas a lot of people say it is what it is as a way to avoid.
Mm,
Yeah.
that's true. That's true. Yeah, because whatever that thing that they're avoiding is extremely painful.
Yeah.
And I love to bring temperature into this equation.
Sure.
And a lot of people hate the cold.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the cold, right? Ever since I got into Wim Hof,
Right.
cold plunges, the Wim Hof breathing method, for those of you, it's basically intentionally going to the cold, experiencing that pain and not judging it, and for experiencing the cold for what it is. And once you do so, like long enough, you acclimate, you adjust, and you're like, oh, wait a second, I can handle this. Right. And so I think like that's the perspective that some people might need to have when it comes to experiencing like trauma, PTSD, like, heartbreak, right? Like it is what it is. So go through it rather than saying, oh, it's too much. It's too this, it's too that, it's too, unhandleable. You have to let it through. And then you're like, oh, wow, wow, that was a terrible wave, but now it's gone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Something I tell basically every one of my clients, and one of the things, like the mantras I had for myself when I was going through some of my really dark times, was the way out is through. I
Yeah.
realized that so much of my suffering had been perpetuated or continued by my resistance and judgment of the suffering as if it was bad and wrong and should not be. When you talk about experiencing the cold and choosing to face the cold, in that there's a yes, it is deeply unpleasant, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. That doesn't mean it's bad. And we can actually choose to go through it. And when you go through it, you acclimate and you realize like there's like this, it's not that all of a sudden the cold water is warm, but it doesn't bite you anymore. There's a softening into it. And the same is true for emotional states, I think, where there's an initial shock when you dip into the emotional state of like that. But then when you just sit with it, in it, and allow it to exist, then all of a sudden you rapidly find yourself processing through it, and then it's gone, and it's like, what the hell just happened? And and you feel light, and you feel joyous, and you feel peaceful, and all of these amazing things. Yeah, I love that.
I actually, everything you just said, I think we can sum it up to surrendering.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Have you read Letting Go by David Hawkins?
No, but I've gone through so much of his work.
Cool.
Like I've seen excerpts, I've seen videos, I've seen the map of consciousness.
Yeah.
So honestly, I should just read his work,
So
but
good, man.
it's really drilled into my head so I can explain it clearly.
Yeah.
That's exactly, man. And I think that that's like the final stage, even in which I'm working on right now, is to like truly, truly surrender.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, me too. Because it's so easy to slip back into the grip of control because we want things. And the moment that we fall into the desire, then we start gripping at the desire. And then the moment we grip we find that we don't have it. And it took me so long and so much like struggle to figure out inside myself that paradoxical balance of vision, having the clear vision of what we want without the gripping of it, and to have the clear vision and surrender it. And there's like this idea that comes to mind of if you are trying to get water, let's say from a pond or whatever, and you closed fist grip it, you come out empty handed. There's no water. But when you just open your hands and gently go into the water, then you can hold it. And it's
Mm,
very much like that, I think, as we surrender. And this is like a surrendered, like I'm willing to be open to it, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you brought it back to surrender. Hit the nail on the head. Well
Yes.
done.
Yes. Yeah. And it's like surrendering the mind because the mind loves to judge, loves
Yeah,
to
it does.
compare. That's its job, you know? Like
It is. That's what it's made for.
that's what it's
Yeah.
made for, to draw relative conclusions based on data perceived through the five senses. But if you keep hammering in those judgments and conclusions, that eventually builds up the wall inside, right? And so that's why you see older people, like old people, like there's a common saying, like old people are so stubborn, you can't change their way of
Right.
thinking. It's because they've hammered in those judgments for
Yeah.
years,
Yeah.
decades, but it still can be hammered through and let go.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And those judgments, they happen so automatically for a lot of people, right? And I imagine for your clients as well. If like so just coming back to the one example, let's say of the lady who had the grudge against her mom. That grudge is a judgment, right? Like that I have been wronged, that this was bad, it should not have been, etc., etc. How do you start to work through those judgments? As in like, yeah, what does that look like?
So I go at it from a don't make sense of it first and then make sense of it.
Can you elaborate on that?
It's like, I'll give a personal example. So while I was on the team, right, I was like more of the creative head rather than an actual leader that ties in all the departments of like, logistics, finance, team morale, right? I was more so like, I need to create good choreography. Somewhere in the back of my head, I was not necessarily the best leader. And that part, that guilt was like shoved away, right? And I was reading another like manga, right? Windbreaker, actually. And
I've not seen that one.
super amazing fighting in the anime, by the way.
Cool.
The lines hit so hard. And it's about Buddhism too, so
Nice.
we'll
I'll have
rest.
to check it out.
And the leader of the one gang was fighting the leader of another gang, and he said to the antagonist gang, how can you call yourself a leader when you allow the face of depression on your teammates? And he pointed to the antagonist leader's member, and you could just see the team member just like pale and sad and depressed. And I allowed that in my team as well. And suddenly, like all these emotions started coming up. All these emotions started coming up, and as the adult response, I just like swallowed it back in.
Right. You go,
I go
nope.
to my car. I had to go pick up food for the family. On the drive to get the food, it just comes out. It's just like I was yelling and screaming and just like all the regret and guilt that was stored in just illogically just started rushing. and I just let it out vocally too, right? Because a vocal ugly cry is one of the greatest releases. And then and then after it all happened, after dinner, I calmed down, and then I went to my journal and I was like, okay, what happened? And then I realized I was holding a, I was holding against myself that I was a bad leader. And so similarly with my client, she didn't realize what was the relationship. She cried first. She told me, she's like, so I did what you told me to do. I I purged it all out. And then I realized it was because of the grudge against my mom.
Yes, man, I love that. That's so good. I really appreciate the personal anecdote as well, because I think what's really important is that anybody in this type of work, that we walk the walk and not just talk the talk, right? And so to be able to share your own experiences with this as well, it's not I read some book and now I'm going to tell you what's going on, right? It's like, here's the experience. Here's the intrinsic understanding from the real realization that then helps you to guide somebody else, you know? And to not put on this persona, I say this as I appreciate that you're not putting on this persona of I am perfect and everything is all figured out and all the bullshit that comes with that. And a lot of people try to do, but just the very real, like, yeah, I've been through a lot of shit, and that's where this insight, that's where this wisdom comes from. Not because I came out in this like perfect palace of everything is sunshine and rainbows all the time, you know? And I think that that's so relatable, and it's very inspirational as well.
Mm.
So thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing this story. Like I had just such a wonderful time chatting with you. And Pramod, if the people listening, they want to reach out to you, where can people find you? Where can people get in contact with you?
Yeah, for content, you can go to YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. You can type in my full name. You can see right here, full name.
Yeah, I'll put it underneath in the description.
Yep. And to directly message me, like if you really just want to have a chat, Instagram would be the best way because Instagram has that messaging feature, and I constantly check Instagram all the time. So
Nice.
you can get to me through there.
That's amazing. Okay. Promote anything else you want to add in before we wrap up here?
Yeah, I just want to thank you. I think the way we got connected, right? We're in a we're in the same community, and you posted that something again, that intuitive message came to me, and I was like, I have to go for this. I have to go for this. Right? Something about this guy. I think the moment I talked to you that first time, I'm just like, bro, why is his voice like butter? Why is his smile so contagious?
Thank you.
Why does he have gentleness in his eyes? And I was like, this has to happen. Right. And so I just want to thank you for setting this up. Thank you for the work that you also do. Yeah, man, you really have aura.
That's so warming and just so touching to hear, man. Like, thank you very much for those kind words, and thank you for reaching out. Thank you for being willing to come on, because truly this is just like such a passion for me. I love being able to chat with interesting people like yourself and learn from people like you, because you have so much insight to be giving. And so likewise, man, it's just such a pleasure. And thank you everybody for listening. We'll wrap up here and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks.